Welcome to our series on Scrum. If you're tuning in, you probably already know the basics of Scrum, like Scrum roles, principles, but theory can only take you so far. So today, we are going to focus on the practical side of things. We are going to translate all of the Scrum theory into a step-by-step flow, taking a raw concept and driving it all the way to production. To make this incredibly concrete, we are going to use a really specific feature as our grounding example for the entire flow, a password reset feature. Because literally every app has one. You sign up, you forget your password, and you need to get back in. It's a totally standard feature, but the journey it takes from being just a random thought in someone's head to a fully functional feature that perfectly illustrates the sheer power of Scrum framework. Okay, so let's dive into this roadmap. We're going to cover the journey from idea to story, refining the product backlog, sprint planning and execution, the daily Scrum sync, the quality check through the definition of done, and finally, the review, retrospective, and beyond. Starting off with section 1, the journey from idea to story. Our journey begins with raw data. Let's say users are flooding customer support because they're logged out and they forgot their passwords. The product owner, the person who actually decides what gets built, has to translate this major pain point into something the development team can clearly understand. They do this by converting the idea into a user story using a very specific, non-technical 3-step formula. Step 1 identifies the user as a registered user. Step 2 states the exact goal. I want to reset my password. And step 3 highlights the value so that I can regain access. Notice what's missing here? There is absolutely no mention of APIs, UI design, or databases because those are implementation details. The user story has to remain inherently simple. It's written directly from the point of view of the user so that anyone reading it can totally get the value that it provides. Moving right along to section 2, redefining the product backlog. So once our newly minted user story enters the product backlog alongside hundreds of others waiting to be built, it doesn't just go straight to the developers. No way. First, we need to set some strict boundaries, and we call these acceptance criteria. These define exactly when the specific user story is considered correct and acceptable. For a password reset, the team establishes some rules. A reset link must be sent to the registered email. That link must expire after 15 minutes. The new password has to meet the security protocols for length and special characters. The user cannot reuse their last 3 passwords. And we need clear error messages for invalid. It is a strictly peer-to-peer sync. If the team builds a feature but forgets even one of these, say the link doesn't expire, the story is simply not complete. That's it. So now, before the real execution begins, the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team get together for a backlog refinement meeting. This is where they literally pull our password reset story out of the pile. They review those exact acceptance criteria, clarify any confusion, discuss dependencies, and roughly estimate the effort it's going to take. Basically, they're smoothing out the wrinkles so that when the sprint actually starts, everyone is completely and totally aligned. All right, to section 3, sprint planning and execution. Now we move from preparation to execution. The team is mapping out their 2-week game plan. So if a password reset is a critical priority, it becomes a prime candidate for the upcoming sprint. During the sprint planning, the team has to answer 3 vital questions. First, what is the sprint goal? Here, the product owner might define the goal as enable users to securely reset their passwords without contacting the support team. Second, what items from the backlog will actually get us there? A refined user story is naturally picked. And third, how will work be done? This is exactly where the development team takes over and maps out their daily plan. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the handoff between the what and the how. The product owner wrote the simple business focused user story. But it is the development team that is breaking it down into highly technical subtasks during the planning session. They're gonna need a subtask to build the UI link on the login page, another to maybe integrate with the backend email service, and yet another to generate a 15-minute expiry token. The team estimates the time for each of these technical pieces, and boom, the sprint officially begins. Now, coming on to our section 4, the daily Scrum sync. Once the clock is officially ticking on our 2-week sprint, the team needs a way to ensure they stay on track, which brings us to the day to day reality of Scrum, the daily Scrum. I want to pause right here to bust a massive misconception. That the daily Scrum is not a management status. It is a strictly peer-to-peer sync-up and a problem-solving meeting. This isn't about reporting anything to the Scrum Master. They are aligning with each other to ensure that the sprint goal is still achievable. They do this by walking through 3 very specific questions. First, what were you working on yesterday? Second, what will you be working on today? And 3, are there any blockers in your way? These are absolutely crucial for catching any early mistakes. For example, if a developer thought integrating the email service would take 1 day, but on day 3 they're still blocked, the daily Scrum would make that visible instantly. The team catches the faulty estimation very early, they adjust, and senior members can jump in to help clear that roadblock. Now let's move on to section 5, the quality check, which is called the definition of done. If we fast forward a bit, a developer proudly announces during the daily Scrum that they have finished the password reset feature. They coded it and it meets the acceptance criteria that we talked about earlier. But in Scrum, this is not where we call it done. What's really interesting here is contrasting these two concepts. Acceptance criteria apply only to a specific feature, like that 15-minute link expiry for a password reset that we were talking about. But the definition of done, those are universal overarching quality rules applied across the board to every single story the team ever touches. Think of definition of done as your ultimate quality check. It might mandate that the code isn't just written, but it is thoroughly peer reviewed by a senior developer. Definition of done might also include things like functional unit test, integration test to ensure that our shiny new feature does not somehow break our existing login code. It might demand 0 open critical bugs, and it might demand that the feature first be deployed to a staging environment. So even if the password reset works perfectly on the developer's laptop and it meets all the specific acceptance criteria, if it hasn't passed every single one of these universal definition of done criterias, the story is not marked done. Now we may move on to the section 6, which is review, retrospective, and beyond. We are now at the very end of our sprint cycle. The feature is built, it's tested, and it has successfully passed the rigorous definition of done. Now it takes the stage. First up is the sprint review. This is a highly practical demo meeting. The developer actually shares their screen, clicks forget password, and shows the email arriving, clicking the link, resetting the password right there in front of all the stakeholders. Now, based on this demo, a stakeholder might say, you know what, 15 minutes is a bit too short for the expiry. Let's bump it up to 20 minutes. That is fantastic feedback, but the change does not happen in the current sprint. We do not keep the story open. The current story is marked as complete, and that new 20-minute request becomes a brand new ticket that goes straight into the next product backlog. Next, the team will hold a sprint retrospective session. If the review was all about the product, the retrospective is entirely about the process. The team takes a hard look internally and asks, what went well? What didn't? For instance, they might realize they wasted an entire day just waiting for the marketing team to write the password reset email copy. So, what could be an action item resulting from that? Maybe for all future sprints, they mandate that email templates are pre prepared before the sprint even starts. The absolutely critical point to understand here is what happens when things don't go perfectly. What if the password reset story simply wasn't finished in 2 weeks? Maybe we misjudged the time or we hit a massive bug. In Scrum, incomplete stories are sent right back to the product backlog. Let's say it again. There is no partial credit. If a story is not finished, it doesn't get a demo, and we absolutely never keep any half finished stories hanging around. It will go straight back to the backlog to be reprioritized for future sprints. Let's look at this timeline to summarize the complete chronological journey we just took. Our password reset started as a raw idea. It became a user story and got clarified in backlog refinement. We mapped out the technical subtask in sprint planning, tracked our daily blockers in the daily scrum, passed the rigorous definition of done, showed it off in the sprint review, and finally optimized our team and its process in the retrospective session. Guys, this is the very heartbeat of Scrum. And this brings us to the end of this Scrum flow. So look, knowing the theory is one thing, but actually executing it is a whole different ballgame. So here is my challenge for you. Think of a basic function in your favorite app. Maybe it's an image upload or a checkout feature. Try to create a user story for that. Try to list 5 acceptance criteria and also draft a universal definition of done. By actively mapping out the flow yourself, you will move from just understanding Scrum to actually mastering it. Thank you so much for learning with me today. I'll catch you in the next video.